Mes amis, bienvenue, bonsoir, bienvenue, ça c'est nous. Merci beaucoup, nous toutes là, nous toutes bien. Merci beaucoup, merci pour venir ici. Accord, non moi c'est Simone. Moi bien content pour nous là ici, pour parler créole, pour toute bagaille, pour célébrer toute bagaille créole. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons créole musique à nous. Moi bien aimé ça, ou bien aimé ça, tout le monde bien aimé musique Dominique. So, nous avons parlé de Jinping, nous avons parlé de Kadaslipso, nous avons parlé de Bouillon musique. Nous ni ici, nous ni Gordon Henderson, Alex Bruno, nous avons expecté Gregory Rabes in a little while. So again, nous allons célébrer toute bagaille créole, nous allons parler anglais, nous allons parler créole aussi. So si on y a un check sur pour m'aider, ou si vous voulez un bagaille, ou ça make a comment section là, aussi aidez-moi. Si moi qui dis un bagay qui c'est pas la bonne bagay pour dire, ou ça aide-moi à parler créole. Parce que ça, c'est ça, moi là pour faire, moi là pour apprendre créole avec Yosé Moun qui déjà connaît créole. So again, welcome to the program. Welcome to Sasenu. I believe we have Alex with us, although I don't see him right now. But we also have Gordon Henderson, and we're expecting Mr. Gregory Rabes to join in as well. So today we're speaking everything Creole. We're speaking especially about Creole music, about Jinping, Kadas, and the Bouillon music of Dominica. And of course, please live, share the information as we try to be the very first program to celebrate our Creole heritage on Facebook Live and via the internet. So we're expecting this to go global. We want to celebrate who we are, and we want to celebrate our culture, and we want to celebrate our heritage. And the only way we can do so is if we continue to spread the information. So let's welcome our other participants. Mr. Gordon Henderson, Sakafet, how was your week?
Eh bien, moi là, semaine là, t'es bien, super, pas de problème. For those who don't understand, I had a great week. I should say that at 3 a.m., that's in a few hours for me, we'll be pushing the clock back to 2. So if you have people in continental Europe, remember it's no longer 6 hours ahead, it's going to be 5, at least for a while.
Good. Alex Bruno, Sakafet,
moi là, tout bien, moi tenu un bon semaine, j'ai été un bon jour. Moi posé en pile parce que c'est seulement jour moyen pour pouvoir poser. Tout long semaine là, moi travaille, moi fait péter l'école. Comme ça les samedi, c'est pour moi pour poser, me lever à l'air pour programme là, comme ça moi là. I had a wonderful week. I normally get a little break on a Saturday, just for a little bit because I also teach on a Saturday, but I take a little break between midday and about 2, 3. And I got up in time for the program, for the expression. I'm very happy to be here. Avant nous continuer de oublier en mode de la musique Dominique, on pas couiller un calypso là.
Oh yes.
Ou dit
moi obligé ça. Oh monsieur, moi obligé ça.
Non. Mais calypso
c'est un rolling. Calypso, yes. So I forgot to mention calypso music. which is a very important part of who we are as Dominicans. So my apologies to the
soca aussi, nous parlons de ça aussi. Soca, musique soca, c'est musique de la Dominique, hein?
Oh, nous ni toute musique à
Caraïbes.
la Caraïbes là.
Là, nous commençons, nous parlons de soca, parce que c'est un bitin, moi, j'ai fait en research, et soca, c'est pas musique Trinidad, moi, je dis ça, franchement. C'est une musique qui est développée, mais c'est une musique qui sort de Dominique. Sorti votre cadastre lipso, je dis que l'autre sorti il était Dominique, il était qu'à écouter musique nous, injecté ouais Gordon Henderson qui a joué.
C'est vrai.
Oui, nous parlons de ça, nous parlons de ça parce que c'est musique Dominique nous parlons de.
Eh ben nous ni en lot pour parler à côte, mais nous qu'à parler à première about l'histoire de Creole music. So we're going to start by looking at the history of the influence of Creole on our music. So Gordon, if you would help us out with this one, can we talk a little bit about the history of the influence of Creole on our music?
Well, first of all, we should put that into two definite and distinct categories. We should think of traditional music and contemporary music, so we don't confuse them. As Alex was saying, the very origins of Calypso, and the Calypso that we know from Trinidad, the one that Trinidad boasts to be almost only theirs, began in Creole. And anyone who, with a little research, maybe Google, I am not one, I don't like to recommend Google for people who want to do serious research. But if you want simple research, Google will show that the very first calypsos that was sung in Trinidad were in the Creole language.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. There are a few examples I could give you. I will tell you something else about it. It's the melodies were all the same. There was only one melody. Usually they would do it with drums and sticks, and eventually the guitar came in, and the singer, who was called sometimes, even the male ones were called a chantuelle, would make a little sound like pa pa da pa da pa da pa pa da pa pa da pa da pa da pa. No, and it was followed by what we may call improvisation, because they didn't write. Most of these people were illiterate. So they would sing spontaneously. So look at a man they call him Alex, and the way he watching me, I think that he vex. You know, so they had all the skills of rhyme and rhythm. Well, in English, you talk of extempotentious.
Yes.
They were
extempo.
Yeah, that we cut down to extempo. So that is what it was, but it was in Creole.
Yes.
Even the very first Calypso hit that sold 1 million in the United States by the Andrews sisters was originally a Creole song, Rum and Coca-Cola. I know in Dominica we like to say Coca-Cola. I don't know where the cocoa came from.
Creole.
Well, okay.
Alex will tell us how it moved from, because it's C-O-C-A.
Permettez-moi ça.
Coca-Cola.
Alex, vous pouvez tant ça vous voulez dire.
Permettez-moi ça, oui.
But there's so much to be said. I will just say, let us always set it in two categories. The traditional. So the traditional music, as far as I know it in Dominica, is almost 99% Creole. And occasionally you would hear a song in English, which is traditional, but I am not sure. Alex probably would tell us when the English came in, you know. And then the contemporary now has been partly in English. So the calypso, the modern contemporary calypso in English and in Creole. We will remember that the Gaylords had a few songs in Creole. Ma John Leve, Mete Maui Moi de Wo, and that kind of thing. And of course, the Kadas era brought in probably 99.99999% Creole, with reason, because it was addressing not only the Dominican audience, but the wide Creole speaking world.
Pascal, let me think of music Creole. Moka only se kadas ki music Creole. Mo pasav Creole, calypso, Cody. So ça c'est un bon bagay ou ka di mwen la. Ebe Alex sa ou vle di?
Ebe toute musique Dominique c'est musique créole. Et Gordon dit nous commençons à faire une mission en anglais. Mais ça vient pas à l'histoire Dominique. 1995. That is 1973, Gordon. That's 1970. Why is 1970 again? 90.
73.
No, so 1970. That is 70.
70.
Okay, so you say that's the time the sort of English fusion start coming into the Creole music expression. That is when the culture was opened up a bit by Libla, and other people got involved. So the people from the Afwawi English speaking part of the country start fusing with the Creole in English expression, and also the bourgeoisie too got involved, because you see, it became a government thing. So nous can make a conwasam. So people who could not speak the Creole use English in the Creole expression. So that's where English came into the mix. But it has always been Creole, 100% Creole in terms of what is said and how the music was created. So that is to answer the question that Gordon brought up about the English influence. And even the English that is used in the music is Creole, because it is English words, but it's Creole that's being presented. Because Creole is not just what you Creole is not how you say it. It's not the language, but it's how you say it too. So you could say something in English, and it's very much expresses itself in Creole. So people like Anthony Gossi, and even that the other guys, the other musical pioneers from the North would have dabbled a bit in the English, but when you listen to their song, it's Creole that you're hearing. So it's something that happened to the music somewhere in the 70s.
Ebe Gordon, dis-nous, comment ou fait Kadas Lipso? Ou dis-moi, l'autre, ça ou created Creole Kadas music on the stage. Dis-nous encore ça.
Oui, parce que nous étions un groupe dominicain et nous vivons en Guadeloupe. Mais en période là, ça, nous avons joué reggae et ça c'était avant Bob Marley. Hein? Nous avons écrit reggae, R-E-G-G-A-Y. Ça c'est R-E-G-G-A-Y, reggae, before Bob Marley. And our friends from Jamaica, some of which may be homophobic, didn't like the G-A-Y, and they changed it to G-A-E, reggae. So we played reggae, R&B, calypso, funk. In fact, we did what groups from Dominica did at the time. We're seeing Gregory is joining.
Yes,
Yeah.
Gregory AC. Okay, annually,
Continue.
Yeah,
continue.
I will continue. So we played that kind of music. We had a first record and it was successful. And a promoter from France decided to invite us to play and what we thought was an engagement, but it turned out to be a dance in Paris, France. And the audience, they were basically people from Martinique, Guadeloupe, and French Guyana who were nostalgic about their country and wanted to hear their music to dance. So we played our repertoire of reggae and funk, and they applauded. After about 45 minutes to an hour, the promoter of the dance, because it was a dance, not a concert, came to me and told me, well, it's very good that the people are appreciating, but they didn't come here to clap. They didn't come there for applause. They came to dance. So we had to find a way to make them dance. So we tried something. We fused what we knew as dance, Caribbean dance music, which is basically our calypso, with our particular Dominican style. We had people like Julie Murillo with us, who played for many years with the Swinging Stars. So Swinging Stars, we would have a long musicology program to talk about the particular calypso style of Swinging Stars, which is unique. When you listen to Byron Lee or Ed Watson or the other groups of the island, Swinging Stars was unique. And Vivian Wallace played sometimes with the Swinging Stars and so on. So we took that calypso and we fused it with what was the hottest in the Creole-speaking world, which included Martinique and Guadeloupe, which was Cadas Rampa and Compa Direct from Haiti. We fused that on the stage, and that was the birth of Cadas Lipso. And it turned out to be unique and original, because when the Haitians heard it, they could identify with it, but they could identify it as something different. So that was the birth of Cadas Lipso, born from Dominicans, or conceived, if you want to use that, by Dominicans, but born in Paris, France.
And Zofet Tutbaga Sala right there on the stage.
Yeah. It was spontaneous, almost like Calypso itself, extempo.
Beautiful. Gregory, bienvenue. Dis-nous l'histoire de Creole Musique Dominique, s'il vous plaît.
Ça, c'est un gorgé ou ça, c'est un big gorgé. Tu connais ça, gorgé?
A mouthful.
A mouthful.
A guab.
Because when we talking about Creole music, well, it's sort of almost synonymous in the sense that if we're talking about the establishment of the modern Dominican society, and I refer to the modern Dominican society as the sort of coming together of civilizations by force or otherwise. So we are talking now about the 1700s, the period of colonization. So on one hand, you had the Kalinago, and then the whites came through, particularly in our case, France, and with them, of course, the Africans. So that sort of, the Europeans brought their musics with them, the sort of square dances and some of the instruments, the accordions and violins and stuff. The Kalinago well, they had a music tradition that goes back to Latin America, and it's more percussive in terms of maracas, shakers, and drums and so on, or made out of wood and so on. And the Africans had the goat skin tradition as well. They had a tradition of banjo in Africa as well, and various things of that nature. And of course, the Africans had a particular, well, in terms of the music, they had what we call a call and response pattern in their singing, their interaction. So many of that's an African tradition, not necessarily a European tradition. So these are the elements that came together back on the plantation now, in spite of all the whips and even the repression of the music on slave in the plantation. So the music evolved. Well, the French were a little bit more bohemian. They were had a little bit more what we call joie de vivre compared to the British. The British were more Victorian, but the French apparently they like a good time. So you find they had a lot of what they call the balls in the great houses, and they would invite. That's probably not the right word. Force the slaves, the blacks, to entertain them. And by, the blacks began to learn some of the instruments from Europe, and even the dances as well. So in that process, we took about maybe 100 years, 100 more years, until around emancipation and post-emancipation. Actually, it is after abolition of slavery in 1844 that the music really, because it was more, well, the environment was more free, so people were more free to develop their creativity. There was no hindrance to that. So because of that, you had Jinping emerging, you had ballet on the other side. So in that part, following emancipation, the Jinping bands emerged. And in some respects, the jazz bands emerged too, because you had jazz emerged as a very popular genre in the late 80s in the United States. And jazz too, you must understand too, jazz is a Creole music, because jazz was created in Louisiana, in that region of the United States, which had a very sort of Creole-based culture with the French and the blacks and the whites. So I consider jazz as part of the broad spectrum of Creole music. So that is the foundation, you might say, of the Creole music in Dominica. Ballet, for example, in terms of the music, is not necessarily Creole, because it has retained the original African rhythms. The Creoleness in the ballet might have to do with the other parts of it, which would be the dress, you know, the Creole regalia and things of that nature. In Martinique, for example, when they were dancing ballet on the slave plantations, the blacks pretended to dance the quadrilles, but in fact they were dancing ballet. So you find that the ballet dances in Martinique are sort of done in squares, akin to the square dances, the quadrilles and so on. But that was a trick, a typical trick by the survival trick, actually, to pretend that they were doing something when they're doing something else. So that is one of the ways, survival strategies of the blacks on the plantation to retain the music. So in that process, you have that creolization. So in the ballet in Martinique, you find that apart from just the dance, it took on other dynamics, which in my sense, creolized it. In Dominica, the ballet, in terms of just the pure rhythm, remained as is out of Africa. Same thing with the Lapo Cabuit. Lapo Cabuit is the street dancing music of Carnival. Now that again is straight out of Africa, and it made, as a rhythm, as a beat, it maintained its authenticity as what it is. The Creoleness now is coming through in more modern times when we get into the recording industry and some of the things that Exile One have been doing in terms of Trio. Trio is a classic example of an attempt to to reproduce Lapo-Cabrite music using modern day electronic instruments. In terms of the Jinping, well, Jinping from day one was a Creole, well, it really was a Creolized music, in the sense that it borrowed all these elements straight off from Africa, Europe, and the Kalinago. So from day one, the Jinping music was a Creole invention, a Creole creation. And post-slavery, as I said, it flowed, and Jinping was very popular and dominated the dance halls in the countryside. And in Roseau, you had the Coronation Hall and some of the other halls in Roseau. And you also had some of the jazz bands, as I said, with the clarinets and stuff like that. So that is how the Creole music evolved up until the period when Exile One, the electronic bands, emerged now. And what these bands did is that they continued the creolization process of the music in terms of the hybrid and the fusion. And in that sense, Cadence Calypso emerged. Calypso is also very, very Creole music as well. I mean, it follows the same trajectory, as I said, the jazz. And Bouillon is a continuation of that. And all experimentations in between, you know, you have, as I said, trying to reproduce the Jinping on modern day electronic instruments. And then apart from that, you have the evolution of the folk music, the traditional music. So in terms of the choir-based music, the chorales, we had an explosion of choral-based music in the 70s, around the time when we were trying to invent our nation, Dominica. So you had the emergence of Sifflé Moutain and the La Jeune Étoile Chorale. And later on in the 80s, you had other bands like the other groups, like the Pébouche cultural group. You had the Grand Fond Upheavals group and other groups in other villages. So you had that sort of folk choral and folk ballads evolving alongside what was happening in terms of Cadence Calypso and Bouillon. So I think in a nutshell, that sort of summarizes, or it gives you a picture really of the Creole music landscape from plantation society to now. Of course, we will get deeper into other things, but that's by surveying the landscape and trying to give you a picture. That is what it is.
Yes, and that was a beautiful picture. Thank you so much for taking us from the history from the beginning all the way through modern times. Now, Alex, I'm going to come over to you. Tell us a little bit more about Creole in Calypso, because you were gracious enough to remind me of the importance of Calypso as well. So, Dino Bagay, Creole Calypso.
Well, as Gregory expressed and explained, and he took us right back to the beginnings, what he did not articulate very, very clearly is that Creole is something that we created on plantation society and coming out of that. So there's African, which is original in terms of languages and expression, but the Creole itself is original and is to us in terms of as a people. So, and every form, music form and other expressions was definitely and instantly Creolized. So Calypso did not have to be Creolized. Calypso was created out of the Creole identity. So there was no need to try to sing or to put Creole into Calypso. Calypso is a Creole export of the people's way of life. And as such, as Gordon expressed before, the songs, the original songs, the pasios, were in Creole. It's only now we sing in English because I guess we are able now to, most people now speak English and Creole and French, so we're able to put.
But why don't we have more Creole calypsos though?
Well, we used to have Creole calypsos before. Almost 90%.
Let me interrupt with just one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Many people don't agree with me,
Mm-hmm.
but I always say that Cadence Calypso is Dominica's
Calypso.
brand of Calypso.
Mm.
I'm with that.
Okay.
And I would like to debate it at some point. Please continue, Alex.
In terms of why, because you see, the people who sang Calypso before were the riffraffs. People did not look up to Kaiso as anything significant. So the Kaisonians were generally men who did not generally speak English, who were uneducated, probably, uneducated, and were illiterate. So the only language they knew was Creole. But with the addition of different people and women and other people, academics and so, getting involved in Calypso, the originality in terms of the idiom used to express the Kaiso has been not lost, but extended into English, another expression. So that explains why we do not do so much Kaiso in English. But if you listen to the older Calypsonians, even Mighty Sparrow, who is a Creole man from Grenada, Trinidad / Dominica, you will hear most of his songs with Creole expression, Creole jams. Even the first soca song that was made in Dominica, UPT, it's a Creole song. Udi mwe upiti shorty, udi mwe upiti umati. So the point I'm trying to make is that we kind of lost the originality in terms of the expression, but we have expanded the Kaiso into other languages, so to speak, or other forms. And that, I think, explains why we do not do Kaiso in Creole as much as we should do. We used to have the bi-local and the independence Kaiso competition. These things have also dissipated. They have disappeared. And we only have the monarch competition now. And we have to sing for the governors and the prime ministers and other people. So we have to give them a little bit English, because that's the language that generally they speak. But the punchlines, especially the clever jabs, you normally have those in Creole. Those things that you want to conceal, and the sweetness of Kaiso. Look at when Hurricane sang Kaiso. Hurricane, most of his punchlines are in Creole.
But all of them from the idol, the spark. Ukite moi lache lamovi, and the chorus. You quite rightly said, the chorus lines in most of the early Dominican calypsos, and when I say early, from the 60s, from the idol, the synth, the spark.
The one about Pardon, Monsieur Majestoire.
That is idol.
Pardon,
all this.
Majestoire. That was a hit.
Yeah.
Oh, that Pardon, that is Spark. Pardon is Spark.
Spark, I think.
Yeah.
But
Ukite Clash, all these songs.
Lache Lamowi was Idol or one of that. Well, Idol was from St. Vincent.
St. Vincent, yes.
So probably he didn't have too much Creole, but the synth had Creole. Yeah. There is one song from the Kitara, Sylvester Sones, that I took the chorus and turned it into a cadence song. Bayou Bois.
Yeah, Bayou Bois, that's Kitara.
Yeah, and yeah, so
I agree.
Yeah, and it kept going all the way to Hurricane. Well, maybe Pat Aaron is too much of a Creole speaker.
No, but Scrunta too, you know. Scrunta too.
Yes, Scrunta very much so.
Bricks.
Right.
General Natty.
Oh, that's my favorite.
So we have to speak to Pat Aaron.
Yes,
because he had a string of hits, and we cannot point out one song with a Creole line.
I'm trying to think.
Well, the thing is, I have two issues to raise here. I think there was maybe about a 10-year gap in the Calypso space in Dominica where it was heavily dominated by English. Because if I myself remarked, I'm saying, but the Californians forget that there's something called Creole. Now, so to sort of break that gap now, I wrote Tiweo.
Okay.
You understand? And Tiweo was a runaway road match. I mean, complete runaway. There was no competition whatsoever. It was a complete.
But Tiweo was before Washla, or Washla was after Tiweo?
I didn't know he wrote that song.
Washla was before Tiweo.
Washla was in 1991, thereabout. So Washla was before Tiweo.
Washla was before Tiweo.
So you kept your focus.
Yes. So, but I want you to raise another issue now of three that is kind of support Alex's point on the Creole, and in terms of the early calypsos in Trinidad were done entirely in Creole.
In
Up
Creole.
Yeah,
until
we said that before. We said that before you came.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
We handled that.
But it had to do though with the active suppression now by the British colonial authorities to actually they really basically put a ban on the singing of
On
Creole
the language, on Creole, yes.
Yes. So in Trinidad, so we had a different situation in Dominica. We didn't have that ban. It was a more maybe a what do you call that thing again?
Self-preservation.
A
Almost
subtle,
like
systematic.
self-censorship. It's
Yeah,
like
a subtle.
self-censorship.
Self-censorship.
Yeah, self-censorship. That's what it is.
Yeah.
To make an individual preference.
So-
Okay, so I just wanted to share these two thoughts.
So that would have affected the Creole too in terms of the systematic, subtle censorship of the language. But of the people who maintained in terms of the original fighters of Calypso always found the way to get in the Creole. And Gregory is correct. I omitted to mention him with his TWU. I mean, this is a classic example of the effective use of Creole or what Creole represented in the Calypso.
Well, I think since TWU, we have seen I don't want to blow my trumpet, but that's what it is. I mean, we have seen more Calypsonians re-engaging, and as Gordon said, especially in the use of what he called punchlines. And it's not only in the punchlines too, no, it's about its concepts. And we must also understand that the Creole is not necessarily wrapped in the French Creole alone, because you also have the English Creole into the language dynamic as well.
Voila.
And we also have to understand too that in our Dominican English, many of the expression courant, the everyday expressions of literal translations of the French Creole. Yes. So you have that kind of dynamic. So you find conceptually, the Calypsonians also take very Creole concepts and write a song about it. At the end of the day, Calypso is storytelling. Really, that's what it is.
But that was Washla, that was when Calypsonians wrote their music, the Calypso. And we come back to Pat Aaron and the question that was asked. Because when guys wrote, they were able to express in the way that they generally would express. But because guys have writers now, 90% of the Calypso singers now have writers. And those writers write based on their own expression. So Brother Pat does not find, I guess probably in his idea, he does not, well, he can use the Creole, but I think his understanding of probably the way in which he writes, he prefers to express in the English Creole that he uses, because he uses a lot of English to Gregory. He uses a lot of English in his Creole. So even if he writes it in English, it is a Creole pun that he throws. If you listen to a lot of Dice songs, although Dice uses English, but it's Creole, you hear it.
Well, that's the point I'm making. That's precisely the point I'm making.
Yeah. But in terms of the language, the use of the French Creole, yes, that has been sadly missing from our Calypso performances. Even in the juniors, to the juniors sing straight English now. And that the sweetness of Calypso is lost because of the lack of experimentation with the Creole that was brought into the thing so nicely with the Calypso evolution and the Bouillon continuation and so on.
Okay, so and if you're just joining us, this is NOU. It's a program to celebrate the Creole culture of Dominica. And this evening we are speaking about the influence of Creole on our music. And we're going to try to remember to speak in Creole because this is a Creole program. So Anu Pale caught Creole bouillon music, ebe ko bouillon music we
Who you want
to? C'est Jean Gougla qui parle.
Okay, well, I will take it. I'll take it on. Bouillon commencé dans les années 80. Bouillon started in the 1980s. Il tenait un espace, a space, cadence lipto, te pon anti pause, like cadence lipto, pause, and then Zouk took its sort of the ascendancy. Zouk emerged as a new genre, Creole, French Creole genre, and it became very popular. Now, the younger generation of musicians in Dominica, the WCK especially, They were very influenced earlier by the jam bands of Antigua and St. Kitts. But then, like everything else, we Dominicans like to find our own flavor. So the anecdote for the development of bouillon goes like this. Colonel Phillips' brother, Darrell Phillips, was very much engaged in the quadrilles and all of that, and the ballet. So he had this Jinping band rehearsing in one section of the basement of their family home. And then Colonel Philip and the WCK guys were rehearsing in another section of the home. And they were hearing the music of the Jinping band, and they just sort of figured, why not try something? Try a thing. Try to reproduce the Jinping song they were hearing on the modern electronic instruments using synthesizers. And out of that, bouillon emerged. Really, that is the sort of anecdotal, like Gordon was talking about, this dance hall in Paris. Well, the anecdotal for bouillon is basically the basement of the Phillips family home on Bath Street, on Bath Road in Roseland. So that is the anecdote for that. But in terms of unpacking the roots and the music of bouillon itself, well, clearly, you have the Jinping influence in there, but the bouillon musicians themselves do not adequately recognize that actually ballet is very much in there, because actually what was being replicated, well, the accordion as what we call the timbre, the tone of the instrument, was taken very wholesomely and weaved into the bouillon. But when we hear the type of beat that we are hearing in the percussive beat of bouillon, that was really, it is true that you were hearing it from the Jinping, but the Jinping actually replicating the ballet sauté on the rhythm. So in that sense, it is true to say that the bouillon is a merger of modern electronic. Calypso is part of that story. Soca is part of that story. Zouk is also part of that story. So that is the modern music that influenced the development of bouillon. And on the traditional side, it has to do with Jinping music and ballet music. So that is how bouillon, in my view, in my understanding of it, my analysis of it, that's how it emerged, and that is the sort of musical influences that go into bouillon. Of course, bouillon has moved on since then, so much so that the bouillon of the 80s and the 90s are now referred to as old school, which takes us into the realm of tradition, because what is traditional music in one historical moment, what is popular music in one historical moment will be traditional music in another historical moment. I mean, for example, Calypso is the music of the middle class of Jamaica. The middle classes of Jamaica detest dancehall. You know what I'm saying? So in a sense that you find that the old school, we now have this convenient term, old school. But it's a kind of a shorthand for the more traditional aspects of the music. But yes, that is my 2 cents on the evolution, the genesis of bouillon. I haven't got too much on the evolution of in that sense, but Triple K and the other thing. But that's another part of the development. Thank you.
Alex, Gordon.
Well, go ahead, Alex.
Gordon, I mean, Greg covered it.
No, I had a quick little story to tell with regards to Creole language in bouillon. Colonel Philip had a brother who unfortunately passed away, and he was very successful at distributing music throughout the Caribbean and even in the US. I don't know if you all remembered him. He had
Ashton Philip.
Ashton Philip.
Yes.
Right. So he sold a lot of Exile One music. I was based in the US at the time, and I used to give him lots of CDs and stuff, because not because he's dead, but he paid very well. And one day he came to me and he told me, well, let's try a barter. And he gave me a whole load of CDs of the Bouillon band from Point Michel.
Serenade.
Serenade. And I said, Lord, what am I going to do with that? And do you know, I sold thousands. I had to reorder and reorder, because there was one song in Creole, Befla Laje.
Oh, yes.
That's correct.
And everybody in the Creole world, from the Indian Ocean, South America, the French Guiana, Martinique, Guadeloupe, they bought the record. So my little story is to demonstrate that we've had cases of Bouillon with Creole lyrics, and probably the Bouillon practitioners, that's a word I notice that we like to use, the music practitioners. The Bouillon practitioners didn't use enough Creole. That I just used that example, throw that in. That's probably not something to think about.
Enough French Creole, but Serenade would have been very popular in terms of the using Creole in the music. For Serenade started playing music before it was Bouillon, you know. Serenade was always they always played this sort of party
music,
jump up, sort of aggressive party music. So it was WCK for real in the 80s, early 80s. And then Gregory, one of the points I wanted to make, and as a musicologist, I wanted to qualify that or disqualify it if you wish. But based on my understanding of the music, it appears as if every music genre or lasts for at least a 10-year cycle. So Cadence Calypso would have come around in the 70s, but by the 80s, the music had changed. And that's where Bouillon came in. And the Bouillon that the WCK brought in, changed in the 90s when the Befla Laje, the Serenade influence and the banter and the rivalry came in. And that would have changed with Triple K. Triple K came in 2000 and 2004. So every 10 years, I think a cycle started. Now Triple K continued, and then there's a guy called Asa Banton who came on the scene, and Asa Banton changed Bouillon again.
Yes, he did.
And I think Asa is almost nearing his decade. And this young fella called Shelly came in again, and Shelly took the Bouillon from a different rhythm, and he slowed it down again and gave it the same original groove that the Bouillon had.
And you have Kex Mafia, and you also have Kex Mafia, which is a poetic, more the poetic side of Bouillon. And while we're on that, because of the fact that Cornell Phillip was also a sound engineer, and in fact producing many of the contemporary calypsos, you will notice that the calypsos of Dice especially are very much, they have a Bouillon edge to it, if you get my point. They have a Bouillon feel to the groove of the calypso.
An Animal Farm.
That's correct.
Cannot be qualified as calypso if Sparrow is calypso.
That's a good point.
Right.
That's a really most of Hunter's song too, Gregory, would be Bouillon, right?
That's correct.
Again, it is same
That's correct. Now what it does, why I was quite pleased about that development was that it maintained what Gordon was referring to earlier on, of the uniqueness of the brand of Dominica's Calypso. So it perpetuated that unique style of Calypso in Dominica. And if you notice what is happening in soca at the moment, in fact, there is a convergence of soca and Bouillon. So in that sense,
yes,
that's correct. So some of the soca songs are actually approximating what Cornell has been producing over the years. So that sort of bouncy groove.
But groovy soca, Groovy
But the
soca
chef,
huh?
Sorry?
no, I was saying that the chef who cooks the
Ingredients, music.
the hits and so on happened to be a Dominican doing it from his kitchen. Dada
Dada, you
Lawrence.
mean Dada?
Dada.
Dada Lawrence?
Yeah.
Yes,
So
Dada.
the famous family,
Yes, my favorite.
which is one of the biggest soca hits in recent times, was
Family.
yeah, it was done in
Produced by Dada.
Well, I am happy you mentioned Dada because Dada did something different too with the music. It's like he took the old and the new and he make it new again.
Yes.
And that is the trick and that's the originality that really remains with our music. Even in my little exploit, my Osama say, I won the road with it, but that was a bouillon, cat soca bouillon. It was a mixture.
Yeah. It was a Dominican whatever. It was very Dominican. Most of your hits, because I didn't realize talking with you recently, and you were talking about your various hits. I realized that you have quite a few road match hits. I don't know if you won the road match, but they were on the road. But they all have a particular Dominican thing about them. Even if they could go into a soca catalog, but the Dominicanness is very, very present and obvious.
Yeah, that was captured between Fred Nicholas and Cornell. And yes, I won the road in 2002, I think, with Osama C. I'm not too sure why I didn't win with Child Money, but that's another subject matter. But again, it just goes to show that our music rhythm is so tight, and Gregory was so much on the point, on the ball, when he spoke about the evolution of bouillon, from the expressions of Jimping, and it actually started in Philip's house on Bath Road, because that's the same story Cornell gave, that's the same story Ashton gave, and that's the same story Cornell's brother, the one who's at the cultural division, Daryl will give. And the music is not going to end. I just believe that every 10-year cycle, Gregory, there is some sort of shift. And if you do not shift, the music will shift under you. And again, Gordon could speak about that because you started Kadas in the 70s, Gordon, and by the 80s, the Kadas had changed.
Yeah, and while we do it, since we have some followers from Martinique and Guadeloupe, one of the things that I say on their radio and television when they ask me is Zouk. The Martinican and Guadeloupean society, they've been, because we're talking about Creole, so it's Creole music as well. They were so happy for the first time in their history to have a contemporary sound of their own, that they clung to it for more than that proverbial decade, into 2, into 3, into 4. And now the big stars from Martinique and Guadeloupe they're moved into dancehall and into other forms. And even there was a time when they did Zouk, they strayed away from doing the Zouk in Creole, and they did it in French. And the vocal style, the locance was done the way that French artists sing French, you know? So Zouk, I don't know, contrary to Compa got the same clout. And when I say clout, I'm talking about the back of the head clout that Kada Slipso got in the Creole market. Because when Zouk came with all the technology, the money, and I'm talking about real money from the French government and their promotion and the support of Martinicans, Guadeloupeans, French people from French Guyana, French Guyanese, if you will, that kind of support, Compa was dead for about 10 years. But Compa resisted. They didn't change the name as Jamaicans did, because in my lifetime, the Jamaican music has been mento, that looked very much like calypso. Then it moved to ska. then it moved to rock steady, then it moved to reggae, and the young guys,
Dancehall.
well, you the young people will say what it has evolved and it has become today.
Dancehall, Lovers Rock.
Yeah. And all of this. Compa, they never changed the name, but they did change the idiom. They took what they could from Zouk, because Zouk brought in the move from electric and electronic into the digital. They brought in the digital and they regained the market. So right now, the dance music of choice for the Franco-Caribbean is compa. And when I work with Zouk musicians today on my Calypso repertoire, more Fitzroy than me have to warn them on certain specificities of Calypso, because they're not even Zouk, they are compa. So in the analysis that we're making, we have to really look at what we have to preserve and how we have to evolve. The 10-year thing that Alex brought up, we have to keep that in mind. As a society, it's not only musically, in everything. We cannot come with bell bottoms today. So playing Calypso, something came into my mind. We had something that did much good to Calypso, because Calypso was practically moribund in Dominica for a period until the credit union, the NCCU, decided to put up a competition to revive Calypso. And I think they succeeded in bringing back Calypso, but they brought back the bell-bottom Calypso. They didn't give any consideration that Calypso is not traditional music. It is contemporary music that was born in the 70s, and by definition, by essence, by societal pride, it must evolve. And I remember having almost arguments with some intellectuals who thought about the authentic, man, the pop, 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 pop. And that's not authentic. That is the bell-bottom form. This is the ska form.
It has to evolve.
It has to evolve, and we have to help it evolve. And we cannot push in the name of what we think is authentic. The only thing that's supposed to be transferred as is from one generation to the other is the traditional music. But the contemporary music must evolve.
We talked a lot about all the different types of music. Avec la musique, are you happy with the state of music in Dominica right now?
Ben oui, moi content. Musique, nous, c'est pas musique. Musique, c'est pas fait pour rester à un côté, seulement en seule place. Musique, mon yon philosophie contre musique qui a dit personne pas qu'à conduire musique. Musique, c'est un putain, nous ni naturellement, et des fois, nous mettons différentes actions à ces musiques-là. Comme ça, Gregory Bess qui fait ça, il met en chanson nouveau pour nous écouter. Gordon qui fait expression à cette musique-là. Et musique-là, qui aller. Nous pensons à une musique en cabane. Musique, c'est pour la terre, c'est pour la vie. Comme ça, mon content, manière musique qu'a développé. Moi, ouais, ça, musique tradition Dominique fait. Moi, ouais, j'ai Trinidad, fait root match à Trinidad.
Oh, yes.
Comme ça, oui, mon content. Est-ce que nous ça fait pli? Nous ça fait pli? Est-ce que nous sommes policiers pour développer et pour défendre la musique nous? Oui, nous sommes ça. Mais manière moi c'est jeune bouc la qui fait musique la Kex Mafia, Michel c'est pour ça moi que musique la qui a développé et moi quoi qui continue à aller moi quoi musique nous qui continue à Guadeloupe Martinique parce que nous c'est même pep. So musique Dominique qui continue rouler. Tout le monde est content, moi d'accord.
Greg Gordon.
Eh bien,
Ça,
pour
je crois.
moi-même, bon, il y a d'autres bagages pour faire, il y a d'autres travail. Il ne pas ça jamais totalement satisfait et puis ça nous qu'a faire n'importe bagage. Mais c'est peinture, nous qu'a peinture.
La vie.
Mais il y a un bagage qu'on Alex dit, nous supposés contents de ça qu'a fait musique. À Dominique, il y a l'autre ça qui est potentiel. Dominican music has a lot of potential. Mais il y a des bagages nous pour faire toujours, c'est pour travailler à sous ces power là. OK? Puis si nous parler de faire musique là aller plus loin, ça veut dire à sous niveau international. If we have to make the music go further at the level of international, we have to address some of the lyrics. And Gordon probably might have some things to say on that, on the lyrical question. En l'autre bail, c'est si nous parler de ça qui est industrie culturelle, as cultural industries. Eh bien, pour nous, Dominique, ça c'est un bail, on peut dire tout nouveau, tout chaud, à un sens. C'est année à présent, nous avons commencé à considérer assez sérieux à niveau politique, à niveau gouvernement, et à nouveau les musiciens même. Qui manière nous ça manœuvrer qu'on nous développer industrie musique là pour nous s'attraper plus bénéfice de musique là. C'est pour ça on le musicien Dominique à présent qui a commencé à mettre quoi dans la société droit d'auteur, we call that in English copyright societies. So many of our musicians are now joining copyright societies because that is where the money is to be made. Gordon, in fact, I will leave it for Gordon now to address the benefits of copyright and in fact of taking the lyrics further on to get that universal message going, because we understand to get the music further away, our message has to be. Bob Marley was very, although he cloaked it in the Jamaican Creole English, but it was sufficiently universal, and he used a very universal basis, the Bible, which is very much universal in terms of the Proverbs and all of that. So I think two areas which we still have to consider in terms of the future directions for Dominican music. Over to you, Gordon.
Eh bien, moi, j'ai trouvé ces jeunes musiciens dominicains là, ils meilleurs que ces générations précédentes là. I'm saying that I think that the young musicians in Dominica are much better than the previous generations. And I include people like Cornell as young, despite his gray hair. I hope he's watching us.
He should.
I think that they're much better than previous generations. There's a thing I always used to read when I was a teenager, that a lot of American musicians started in the church. And I noticed for probably the last 30 years or so, a lot of Dominican musicians that I have worked with, they started in the church in Dominica. In my days, there was only an organist in the church, but now we have drummers and guitarists and keyboard players that started here. Their vocals, they sing much better than the previous generation. They're much better than us. They are probably, they listen to good singers on television and they're much better singers. Now, what the writing thing, because we notice in Calypso, it's kind of structured that you have writers and then you have singers. In the other genres, people write, but they do not respect the basic standards of poetry, because a song is basically a poem that is sung, S-U-N-G. So the lyrics should respect. So some work has to be done on that. Alex brought up a very important point last edition, the last time that we spoke last Saturday about policy. I think that if we have to consider cultural industries in Dominica, as Gregory suggested, we need some policy that would assist all that talent that we have, because having talent isn't enough. You have to develop the talent, and you cannot develop talent in a space like Dominica without policy, unless if you want all your talent to exile, like most of us. Gregory exiled, for about 10 years in Great Britain and so on.
Yeah, you're right.
We would be so happy if we could have been at home, and then we would go out as tourists, and when I say as tourists, to tour or on tour.
But
So
that
happily home,
and that policy, Gordon and Gregory would have Gordon, Fitzroy, Freddie, Gregory, and all of them getting back into the school system to teach the students, the pupil, about the music, the basis of the music, and even the idea of composing the lyrics behind the music. So a policy would include all of that. We teach the Creole calypso music at schools, and the chefs would be the ones to come to spend maybe an hour every week in a different school to make sure that the next generations of Dominicans continue the tradition. So that is one of the aspects of the policy, the teaching, and then the marketing, the packaging and stuff like that. So very, very good point. I'm Gordon, you brought up here, especially as you talk about the music and the poetry behind the writing of the songs, and just the taste too, the taste of the words used. You hear the bouillon music that we hear these days. The crevice and in your Susan. Where are these things coming from? You could say this in such finer language. Look at the Mighty Sparrow and Saltfish. Find ways to create lyrics that is edifiable. Because I was a major bouillon fan with WCK. I was in the Medveille video. If you look at the Medveille video, that was me and my son. But I do not really appreciate the bouillon as I did then. Shelley and Kex, they do not different vibes now with it. But I must honestly confess that the Triple K tenure with the bouillon, and even a little bit of what my good friend Issa is doing. He's telling stories now, but I think he does a bit better. But there was a 10 years of bouillon that I really didn't take on too much because of the treatment. And I'm not being critical, I'm just being analytical in terms of the lyric that I hear coming from the bouillon.
No, but that too. But Alex, you made a good point there about the teaching, and that's one major issue. And interestingly, the COVID-19 now introduced a new dynamic in the equation. So right now, I think schools would have no excuse, actually, at the present conjuncture, because we have begun seeing the teaching of the arts online, and the school lessons being done online during the lockdown, right? The cultural division has started some stuff online. What it means, for example, Gordon can stay in France, in Paris. I can stay in my coin kai in Atkinson. You can stay in your coin kai up in where are you?
Boynton Beach, Florida.
Okay, great. And you can do a class from your home, and that can be beamed now to 52 schools at the same time, same hour.
Yeah.
Now, another point I would like to make on the policy part, which Gordon actually introduced. There is a general, it's across the board, not just Dominica, it's across many, it's only places like countries like Cuba, for example, and Russia and France, maybe Britain and Europe. but where you'll find the arts have a more prominent place in the budget and in the policy and politics of the system.
Yeah. China,
Our
Venezuela.
countries, generally speaking, the first part of the budget to go in any disaster, is the arts. Now, interestingly, none other than, I think it was Lisa Hanna from Jamaica.
Jamaica.
I don't know if you know of Lisa Hanna.
Oh yes, I know her very,
We
very
saw
well.
a video
I know of
recently.
her. She's an amazing politician.
Right, I think it was she. I have to confirm it, but she was making a very interesting statement and observation, I believe, sometime earlier this year, that the Jamaican policy makers, despite the fact that Jamaican music was raking in millions, man, to Jamaica, that you don't have enough of a presence of Jamaican music represented in the budget, on trade shows, and all this sort of export-based strategies and pronouncements and so on. It's nowhere to be seen. So I think we have the same issue here in Dominica as well, that the music is always taken for granted, is always an afterthought. And if, for example, the policymakers, especially those that control the purse strings, in the same way, I think we made the point in the first edition, I believe, the same way that it has been recognized that there are quite a lot of economic spin-offs to be made on the World Creole Music Festival. Matter of fact, the World Creole Music Festival has to serve as a model for the rest of for the broader music industry in Dominica. Yeah. It goes to show that if you have a certain amount of state sector and private sector intervention, you would have a lot of things happening. For example, some of the digital companies, they throw a lot of money at so-called music or entertainment. But the music is really being thrown at the seawall, part of the entertainment. Yeah. Nothing is going in for the development of the music, the training of talent, and the development of money is not going there. And that because is
we don't have the policy, Gregory.
Right. So, well,
while we're at it, let me interrupt you just for a second here. Let me jump in.
You can go ahead. I think I made the point. You can go ahead.
I did make a request for you to be on the NOU, and I did get written confirmation that my wish was acknowledged. That I am paraphrasing, but that yes, you would be on it. So I'm looking forward to you tomorrow evening. Yeah.
Tomorrow, he's going to be on tomorrow.
I haven't received a call yet from anybody.
Okay. So well, I don't know if it's tomorrow, but I did hear the host, the Prime Minister, saying that in the next edition, there will be a number of people in various areas of Creole culture or Creole industry who will be his guests. So I don't know if it's tomorrow or next Sunday or when.
So guys, let me just chime in real quick because I was actually looking at the questions on Push Past 10, but it seems like there are more questions on Gordon's watch program that he set up. So I have to let you know that Cornell Phillip is watching, Derek Ra Peters is watching, and there are a number of comments that they have posted. So I'm gonna try to sort through it as I look at Gordon's feed instead of Push Past 10. And again, our apologies, I was looking for the comments on Push Past 10 instead of on Gordon's feed. So as I'm looking at the comments, I just want us to, because we need to kind of wrap up, it's almost 7:30. Just tell us, where do you see the music of Dominica heading? What direction would you like to see our music go towards?
Sorry, these are questions coming from the comments?
Well, I'm just putting that question out, and now I'm going to look at the questions that people have posed on Gordon's live feed instead.
Well, I just think we need to organize our craft. I think we have the talent, as Gordon says. So we just have to come together, have a policy that covers a wide range of areas and just assist the young people and those people who are still involved, the creators of the music, to do stuff for the betterment of the music. I mean, talk about the education in terms of the intellectual properties of the music, the composition of the music, the production of the music, the writing of the music, the creation of the lyrics behind the music. So, I mean, we just have to organize behind the standard policy. I think we need that renaissance to go with the music, because if and Washla, you too can attest to that. Music has been a major way of life for societies, and compa music started because of the Haitian president who actually insisted that Haiti needed a signature music, national music, because Santo Domingo on the other side actually had a sort of Latin American fusion sort of music type, and they wanted to rival that type. France too wanted to have its own expression in terms of its musical identity. That's why the French government has put so much money into the zouk. So in Dominica, we should do more to maintain our Dominican musical identity. So we go back to gain policies, we go back to financing, we go back to Renaissance, we go back to teaching the craft to the younger sets of musicians. That's where I think the music should go.
Okay, so we covered some of these bases. My one point I would like to make on the future direction is probably something I'm actually doing at the moment. Is basically pushing the boundaries and not being afraid to experiment. Because we've been talking about Creole music tonight, and Creole music is really about fusion, right? I'm actually working on 2 sets of repertoire at the moment. I'm working on a sort of what I might call a pseudo bouillon jazz repertoire, and I'm also, well, I've been working on quite a number of years now on what I call a Bele jazz repertoire. Okay, so so we have, in fact, just yesterday or the day before, one of the I hate to use that word, really, up and coming. So I retract that. One of the young, brilliant musicians a guitarist from Dominican called Maxion Smith. He just released something on YouTube, which is I
heard it.
Jazzy,
Yes, beautiful
African guitar style on a lot of Dominican iconic folk hit songs. And Macu, that is being done in Martinique and Guadeloupe and Haiti. People like Ralph Condé in Haiti, they've been doing that for quite a while now. So it's not actually a new thing. It's just that I think, and in line with that, our younger musicians need to, by spend hours on YouTube, quite frankly, you go on YouTube and there's just so many things happening, so many different styles, what is happening in Angola, in Cape Verde, all the convergences with our Creole musics and all the experimentation and fusion going on. And that, I think, will give our musicians a lot of ideas, not only in terms of the musical ideas, but in terms of the lyrical ideas. I pulled on some stuff from YouTube from a group in Guinea-Bissau called Tabanka Jazz. And these guys, they had what you call a percussive solo, a break within the performance with the drum kit, the congas, and the timbales. And what I was hearing was the what they call it in Trinidad again, the engine room. What I was hearing was the engine room of bouillon. You understand? So I said this to say that sometimes our music, we tend to take it for granted, but our music in Dominica, whether it's the bouillon or the canon slip, so it is reaching further than we even realize. So it means that therefore we must not discount what we have in that sense. We must not knock what we have to have. In fact, it is going beyond, so much beyond the borders that we can dance and sing about it. So I think as part of we talk about policy, we talk about the industry and other things, but I think in terms of the musicians now, I would want to encourage the musicians to continue to experiment, push the boundaries, and do not be afraid to do so. Cornell himself, I think, did that on an album called Interpretations, where he did interpret, in fact, he did interpret a bouillon track he could have fused that into this, this sort of German, Austrian, Alpine, yodel kind of street marching kind of music, with one of the hit songs of WCK. He transformed that into sort of that kind of military march, you know, that kind of stuff. So that's the whole idea, that we can push it boundaries. So what Max and Swift released yesterday is just another example of what can be done to fuse the tradition and the modern. We cannot go to the old school like the cadence with bell bottoms, as Gordon quite rightly said, but we have to bring it into the digital age. And I think that is what people like Cornell and some of the more modern musicians have been doing, continuing from where Exile One has left. But don't forget, Exile One did a lot of experimenting and evolving kind of music within the period. If you just go through the records, as a matter of fact, if you listen to the CD that accompanied the book Zouk World Music in the West Indies, it was done deliberately. There are extracts from NOU Jean-Baptiste, who is one of the founders of compa music, and it goes all the way to the cadence dipso hit. So you can, in that CD, you can see how the music evolved from the roots of compa to how Zouk evolved. So that's the whole idea. Merci appeal.
Yes, and let me jump in real quick. I'm looking at the comments as well, and Gordon, you might be able to see more of the comments because I can only see a few of them on my end. And one comment from Alain says, Gordon, you are so right. I love compa, but what we have today is Mada and Guada, and it's sad to say we've been invaded and definitely conquered big time. Comments, anyone?
I may have a little comment on it, but on the previous question, we'll keep this one in mind. Your question was, I think, what does Dominican music need today?
Yes.
I always look at it from an industry standpoint. One of the things that I think that is needed is those involved in music, the music practitioners, should start thinking market. I have a feeling that when I speak to young music practitioners in Dominica, that they're very vague about the market. Many dream to be a Rihanna. Now, there is nothing wrong with dreaming big, but Rihanna is an exception. Even Barbados has not produced another Rihanna. So targeting the American market from Dominica with the hope that some JD will come for another Rihanna, probably you need to have more than one egg in your basket.
Mm-hmm.
There is proof that the Creole market, that market, it comprises many millions of consumers, and some of them are very high-powered earners because they come from the French departments where minimum wage is higher than with the minimum wage in the United States. Check it out. And for some reason, maybe that same diglossia that people have in the language, that there's an inferiority complex about Creole. They have that inferiority complex and they want to target, they want to get road match in Trinidad. There cannot be more market value in getting road match in Trinidad than a hit in the Creole market. So I think that the people involved in marketing in Dominica, Dexia cannot be only about exporting dash-in. Of course, I'd like them to export dash-in. I would like to buy Dominican dash-in France. But Dexia could work with the musicians and the producers and the this and the that, the practitioners, on identifying markets for the music. And last thing I will say on that is the product must target the market. So if you have a product, like I remember St. Lucia, they're very much in love, or they used to be very much in love with country and Western music. And it's good for St. Lucians, they enjoy themselves, but you're not going to export it anywhere. So probably we need to look at our product, look at our markets. And it's not only for dashing, do the same thing for the music. The question with the bouillon and the guada is, you can call it stolen legacy. Dominica had bouillon music, and for many years, and the branding was not properly done. I used to be, well, I go to Guadeloupe very often, and bouillon music was referred to in Guadeloupe as jump up. That's the word that was used to identify that music from Dominica. It was called jump up. When the word bouillon became very popular, it had the same bad reputation that rock and roll had in France. When rock and roll was introduced to France, the older people didn't like it at all. They thought it was a noisy thing for ruffians and bandits. Bouillon had a very bad reputation, and maybe it was protectionism because they didn't want bouillon to invade Guadeloupe in particular, not Martinique. Bouillon had a bad reputation. So that was not justified, because no one can say that it was because of bad lyrics. The people don't understand the lyrics. They don't understand the lyrics. There was just something anti-bouillon. But the bouillon was so strong on the Guadeloupean society that they Guadeloupeanized it and called it Guada bouillon. Mm-hmm. And monopolized it, so, but I still think that if we had policy in terms of the marketing of our music, that could have been, I wrote a few things on Facebook then, protect the bouillon in Guadeloupe, protect it, but nobody listens to me. Mm-hmm. I hope that even when they respond, and they tell me, yes, Washla will be on the program, that somebody listened. I'm not provocative, Everything I'm saying is true.
Okay, I have another question. Cornell Phillip just actually made a post. He said, I always thought Kadas was played on the cymbal until Fitzroy Williams schooled me by saying it was played on the hi-hat. Anybody has a comment on that?
To me, this is a trivial thing. Kadas is a mixture of calypso and Haitian music, be it compa or cadence rampa. So to understand how, because this question is directed on the drums, go to YouTube, and that's for Cornell, and that's for everybody else interested in that. Go to YouTube, look for a song titled Cadence Calypso, and listen to it twice or three times and listen to the drums. So there's pat cymbals, pat hi-hat. When it's on the cymbals, it's the Haitian input. When it's on the hi-hat, it's the calypso input. It's a mix and all that. And keep in mind, we were in the ball bottom days, so we had influences of Earth, Wind and Fire. We had influences of Ossie Bisa from Africa, Mantra with the Latin, and all of this came together. It's a pity we didn't find a nice Creole name like Bouillon.
Alex, you look like you have something to say. Alex, you look like you have something to say.
No, Gordon said it all. Gordon said it all, because Gordon gave me that story before on many, many occasions. So I'm just appreciating and enjoying, and I'm happy that
the thing about the Guada Bouillon, we have to understand too, and Gordon will know that too. It became eventually what you call an underground music, eh? Nothing to do with SASM, you know. I mean, I'm talking about that music circulated underground, below the radar of mainstream, the radio stations, all of that. So it was almost like you might say, a subversive music, a young rebel kind of music. And you have to understand too the Guadeloupean society, because they live a sort of a quasi-colonial kind of hybrid, being part of France and at the same time being on the margins of France, literally, actually, and metaphorically. So that creates certain sort of you might say, is a big word, dichotomies in the society of Guadeloupe in terms of their identity, whether it's musical identity or cultural, the broader cultural identity and so on. So you do have a sort of almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde situation happening in general society of Guadeloupe, which impacts on some of that current rebelliousness of the young people trying to be more, I think, more Caribbean in your outlook rather than Franco-European in the outlook. But you might want to just add to that.
Well, on the underground thing, I'll just say quickly, I was invited once to be a guest artist on a recording, and I had my own lyrics. So in the lyrics, I said, I spoke of calypso and reggae and bouillon. When I reached bouillon, the producer stopped. No bouillon, no bouillon. So it's a production that was destined for that market. So he doesn't even want to hear the word bouillon in the song. So I respectfully took off bouillon, but that showed to the extent that it was underground, but underground not only as we speak in the music industry, but there was an organized and orchestrated anti-bouillon movement in the society.
So let me just jump in again, because again, I apologize. I was looking for the comments on Push Past 10, but the comments seem to be all on on Gordon's feed instead. So we have a comment from Arnold Tulo, and he says that he's speaking to Derek Ra Peters, and he said his chronology is definitely jumbled up here. Bel Air grew outside of the Creole environment, basically West Africa. The square and quadrille developed out of Victorian type ballroom dancing. In all cases, the Africans used a rhythm that was more fluid and danceable, fusion of what they heard from the Europeans, but less formal. The Jinping accordion style precedes what is called bouillon by at least 10 years, but was classified as bouillon, a title sealed by the employment of the conch shell, which the other indigenous instruments, so that whole genre became classified as bouillon. It's a mouthful, but I think he's saying a lot here. Anybody want to comment?
But Gregory,
I think he's saying the same thing I said.
Yes,
he's saying the same thing I said.
Gregory addressed that.
Okay,
No, but
cool.
they're talking about anomalies. They're saying the same thing I said. Really.
Yeah.
Gregory
Because we're
addressed
talking
that.
about the influences. Bella came from Africa. The other dances came from Europe. I don't see any anomalies here. Really.
The thing is, she's saying that is he saying that in response to Ra? That's what you said?
Yeah, I guess I missed the beginning of the conversation. I don't
So
have access
Ra
to
must
the
have said
beginning of the
something and that he tried to
conversation.
chime in on.
Yes.
Oh,
So I'm just making sure we address
But
some of
Arnold
the
got it
comments
right,
that came
and
in.
Arnold pretty much followed the path that Gregory
Yeah.
followed.
okay.
Ra's contribution to the Assam should not be missed, however, because
Yeah.
I find Ra to be an amazing lyricist. He is
Yeah.
like the Baba Oro, one of the major storytellers of African society, and he has this ability to craft words to make it stick. So I believe that is more Ra's contribution. He's like the soul, the eye of the music. He tells the story of the music. Whereas the music evolved from other traditions, mastered in the Phillips family through the same genre that Gregory spoke about. But so what Ra did, he embraced the idiom, the style, the rhythm, and he gave it a voice. And I do not think
I must
Ra
add,
was a drummer too. Ra was a
yes,
drummer. He's a drummer.
yes, he's a drummer.
but
And
I
a
need to
percussion.
add to what Alex is saying about Ra. Ra has proven himself to be a genius in terms of popular melodies.
Oh, yes.
Very recently, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, there's a young lady from, how they say it in Dominican, Funkle.
Funkle.
Funkle, who emerged as the winner, or she shared the road match.
Yeah.
And I wasn't surprised that Ra helped her out with it, because she's not much of a singer. She doesn't seem to keep time or key and all that kind of thing. But Ra with that sense of popular melody and Creole melody, because it's not R&B, it's not reggae, it's Creole. He has a sense of Creole melody, and sometimes I think that this is overlooked.
But rhythm too,
rhythm too, to make these melodies, you must have the thing. This is why I don't want to stray, but I want to give a demonstration. The biggest hit of Kassav, which is not a Kassav song, is 2 members of Kassav did it. George Decimus and Jacob, is Zuklase Selmedi Kamanuni. Great Creole melody, big hit, but it is based on a rhythmic pattern. Pak 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 patak patak pak 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 patak patak pak 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 pak. Zuklase Selmedi Kamanuni. You do tak 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 patak patak pak pak tak pak pak patak. This is what Ra has. Analyze Ra's songs. And when people talk about Bouillon King, well, of course, probably there are Bouillon Kings on the keyboard, Bouillon Kings on bass, Bouillon Kings on the cowbell, because I know a Bouillon King from Midnight Groovers. He plays the cowbell like a violin, but the Bouillon King in terms of the vocals, the delivery, and the composition is Ra. That's my take.
The story.
No, but you're correct. You're correct.
The story. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Because he actually carries it. He rides on the rhythm and he carries the message. He tells the story and he captures it in song. I mean, when you listen to the songs that he did, I mean, I just call them even Fume, which is a song that, you know, it created a pleasantness listening to Fume.
Really? I don't think so.
You didn't like Fume?
No, I didn't like it at all.
Oh.
No,
well,
I don't like the idea of the song.
Oh, the idea. But it's a song that you can listen to around the dinner table and laugh.
It's a very Creole phenomenon. But we have in many channels we have what you call winning formulas, like Elton John and Bernie Taupin. That is a winning combination. There are many others in the soul, R&B, and all that stuff where you have a top-rate musician coming together with a top-rate lyricist. And I think in the bouillon genre, Cornell and Ra would represent that winning combination.
Oh, great combination.
Absolutely.
Sorry?
Great combination.
Absolutely.
That's right. They brought so in that sense, when you Cornell was able through his dexterity on the keyboards to reproduce, well, not only the accordion timbre in his own way, but the rhythmic, what we call, I sense you all a word called fiole. In the accordion playing, there's a word called fiole. It's almost like a what the Trinidadians call on the steel pan ramage. It's a sort of a very it's improvisation, right? But you're free, you're soloing, you're free form. It's like freewheeling on the instrument. So fiole is that kind of stuff. So you have all this sort of as I said, both of them brought different things to the pot.
Two kings
Represent a winning formula.
But Gregory, you are very right. I remember we did some work with the Petit Savant band. I actually brought them into Cornell's studio and we wanted to do a recording.
Ecstasy?
No, the Edney, Francis and Bunch, these guys.
Oh, the Jinping band.
Yeah, we actually brought them into Cornell's studio to do a recording, and Cornell can remember, he started the recording. And then Mr. Edney Francis hold a note on the accordion, and Cornell stopped, and he came in this thing, and he said, play that again, I need to see that. Because he felt that Edney had an ear for the music that he had not heard before, and he actually had Mr. Francis to show it to him, and Cornell took his time on the keyboard and tried to replicate what Edney had done, because Edney was he's a genius in terms of.
I remember he was blind, you know, blind. So he was doing it by ear.
Yeah. So, and he told this man, I remember that vividly. Play that again for me, because the first time I hear it played the way that he was. So you are right, Gregory, in terms of his sensibility of the music and Ra's rhythmic addition. And of course, don't forget Keith with the state in because the bass line is very significant. So Keith also, again, his background with his parents, and so his mother most likely, and most importantly, with the background in terms of music. So he brought the bass line to the music, and I think it all came together magically. And
I have to tell you guys, a number of musicians are actually on the live feed. So I'm hoping that we can continue this conversation and we can actually have them join us. I see Dada Music is on, as well as Jeffrey Alexander is on. Wow. So we are hoping to invite them and have them join the conversation. And I also want to make a quick comment from Derek Peters. And he says, don't forget the rhythm builder, Morris. Isis.
Yes. Beats. Yeah, Morris was the king of beats, beat creator. So because you have the rhythmic part, then you have the beats. So Morris Isles was a king of beats. He created the beats. Yes.
So as we get ready to wind up, it's been like almost 2 hours and the conversation has gone so very well. Do we have some final thoughts?
Well, we're content. We were able to document, I hope, this thing is recorded, aspects of Dominican's music, because we always have this conversation, more between Gordon and myself, repeatedly, and Washla, when we meet, we always have our little conversation. But I'm happy with what you're doing, Simone, because you're documenting an aspect of our history which we probably may not be able to tell as well as we are telling it now. And I'm just happy to play a little role in the storytelling in terms of where we came from and where we can go. And I'm hoping that you invite other people. As you said, the other people who are listening, invite them. Probably I could take a break as long as I can, so I could listen to the addition that they bring to the discussion. It is necessary what you're doing. I give you full marks for making this move to document Dominica's Creole and Dominica's Creole music.
And if I might just interject, Colin XP just WhatsApp me and say, I'm watching too, I'm just not commenting.
So she's an institution.
We have a lot of people that we would love to see come on the program and talk about, what we are discussing here. So Gordon, Gregory, your final thoughts?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Colin, the role and contribution of women to the both the traditional and the contemporary music is a topic in its own right, so that especially in traditional music, really driven by women. So that maybe is another topic we might want to explore in another program. The role and contribution of women in our Creole music over the years, and have someone like Carlene and Mikel would be good on that too.
Yes, Mikel as well. Yeah.
on such a program. And of course, Ophelia would be another person because they have gone through. So you have a mix. You have Carlin, for example, who is sort of halfway between the older and the modern. I'm talking about being born. No, in terms, because for example, I always refer to myself. I'm saying I was fortunate that I was born at the time when Dominica was moving from the traditional way of life to modernity. So I had a first-hand experience of the traditional way of life growing up in the countryside and what we call modernity and the digital age. So that's part of my experience.
But Gregory, you must bring in Janet. You must bring in Janet Azuz and Ophelia too, in terms of the.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We do have we have women who can actually just handle a whole program on that topic in its own right. But
so stay tuned, we're gonna do that.
Simen Salah, c'est Simen Créole à Dominique, et puis Journée internationale Créole, c'est mercredi le 28 octobre. Il y a une grande conférence en Saint-Lucie, moi qui ai fait une présentation à ça. Et puis il y a une grande conférence à Zoom en Guadeloupe, correct, en Guadeloupe. Et puis il y a une participation, monde qui a défendu Créole, tout en la terre sur ces programmes-là. So I'm saying that next week is a very important week it's basically Creole week, and on Wednesday coming, it's International Creole Day, the 28th of October, and a couple of very important things happening that the viewers can view online and participate. Merci en pile, merci en Shai, merci en Lloyd, all means the same thing. Thank you very much.
Remember, guy, Gordon.
Well, it has been a pleasure being here 3 consecutive Saturdays. As was suggested, I think it would be a good idea to invite other people, particularly ladies. The question, we're speaking Creole, Creole, but the Creole music seems to be a very hot topic. And I would encourage you to pursue it and so on. And I would like to sit back and comment.
Definitely. So again, thank you for being here. And of course, next week, and I'm going to try to say this in Creole, Madam Alec Boyd Knight, Kavini, Parle Cote Nou, Ika Parle Cote Manger Creole. Ebe nou bien kota, Ika Vini, esi pour parler Manger Creole.
Semaine
prochaine.
Ah, ok.
Semaine prochaine. Ebe nou ka continue ça. Jusqu'à octobre, nous allons continuer le programme ça là. Core Wadix, Prince Wadix, qui dit ça est malade semaine prochaine. Ça est malade.
Yeah, Simone, I really must big up Thompson Fontaine, who messaged to say that he's in the wee hours of the morning, he stayed up to listen, and I think it's a very inspiring conversation. So Dr. Fontaine is nice to have. So the entire world is on.
Yes. So
and forgive me because I shared. That was to get a larger audience, but I didn't realize that people would comment and that would disrupt the.
It wasn't disrupted because I was anticipating the comments, but I was on push past 10. And they were commenting on Gordon's live feed itself. So then I switched over to Gordon and realized that's where the conversation was happening. So we might have to go back and look at the conversation and continue the conversation online.
The new bouillon king, Ra, I'm coming.
Yes. So a few people on the feed should be expecting some invitations to join us. So hopefully they'll accept. And speaking Creole is not mandatory, but I trip over myself all the time, but I try.
It is essential. Speaking Creole is essential. Not mandatory, but essential. Very essential.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and we'll do it again next week, same time, same place.
Okay. Goodbye.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye now.